world as it is, go inside to find my God. I will leave this world as it is, go inside to find my God. I will leave this world as it is, go inside to find my God. I will leave this world as it is, go inside to find my God. Inside there is peace, inside there is joy, inside there is more than enough. Inside there is peace, inside there is joy, inside there is sacred love. I will leave this day as it is, go inside to find my God. I will leave this day as it is, go inside to find my God. Inside there is peace, inside there is joy, inside there is more than enough. Inside there is peace, inside there is joy, inside there is sacred love. I will leave this life as it is, go inside to find my God. I will leave this life as it is, go inside to find my God. Go inside to find my God. I'm going inside to find my God.
Going inside to find my God. That's what we're talking about today. We're going to use some different words for that, but that's the message of what we're doing. Our theme this month has been getting grounded, back to the basics. We're looking at the basic principles of science of mind. And so the first week of this month, I talked about our belief that God is all there is, and how in science of mind, we view spirit, God, a little different than many of the mainstream churches that see God outside of us, because we see God within us as well as all around us. So recognizing God being all there is, not two powers, good and evil, only good, only God. The second week, we explored the power of our thoughts and how our thoughts create the life that we are living. Our dominant thought is what's going to manifest in our life. And we learned that what we think about is what we'll bring about. So it's up to us to keep our thoughts clear and focused where we want to go in life. Last week, we considered the principles of successful living. And we talked about how we develop our spiritual muscle. To create spiritual muscle means we must do our spiritual practice each and every day. And that spiritual practice is what takes us inside to meet with our God, to be strengthened by Spirit within us to recognize that this power that's greater than us in the universe is at our disposal. And through our thoughts, through our words, we can command this because infinite possibilities are available to us. Today, we get to explore what the mystics have taught. And so, how we're looking at this today is understanding the golden thread of truth that lies through all religions, philosophies, and science through an understanding of mysticism. What is mysticism? What are mystics? I know you've heard the term. You may even know some people that you think are mystics. Ernest Holmes said, "A mystic is not a mysterious person, but one who has a deep inner sense of life and their unity with the whole." He goes on to say that mysticism and psychism are entirely two different things. Mysticism is connecting with the truth, or connecting with spirit within. And psychism is reading the energy from the outside in either yourself or someone else. But that's a whole nother talk topic for a different Sunday morning. Today, we're focused on the mystic. It says in the textbook on 419, a mystic is one who intuitively perceives truth and who, without conscious mental process, arrives at spiritual realization. Now let me stop right there. What is he saying? He's saying that when we go within and we're connecting with the divine within us, we can have a revelation. We can know something is the truth. We can see things different than the outside world sees them. And that intuitive knowing, that intuitive life here, is connecting with God. That's a mystical experience. Mystics, he says, include the great prophets, the inspired writers, the illumined souls of all ages. All the mystics have recognized the absolute unity of God and humanity. And that's what we're looking for here, is that unity of God and humanity, of God and ourselves. For mystics in the past, spirit has been their teacher. That intuitive knowing is what leads them and guides them in their life. When I think about different mystics, and what is the golden thread of truth that they all found as they were becoming enlightened? It doesn't matter which one we're talking about here. Jesus retreated to the wilderness to pray. Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree by himself to meditate. Muhammad went away into the mountains to the cave. Moses ascended Mount Sinai to experience God. Each of these mystics had their own experience, and the golden thread of truth is that each of them found that by going away from the outside world and going within. When we go within, that's where we can find spirit. That's what Alicia was singing about, going within to find my God. And seeing that and experiencing that and having that relationship, when we can fall in love with the divine and we go within to experience that, we can become a mystic. We can have that mystical experience. We typically think of spiritual figures as mystics. However, anyone who really has this connection with that power in their life is a mystic. Ernest Holmes said, the great poets have been true mystics who through their poems have revealed the presence of God. Men like Robert Browning, Tennyson, Wordsworth, Homer, Walt Whitman, Edward Rowland, still others of like nature have given us poetry, which is immortal because they had a spiritual sense of life. Great philosophers of spirit are mystics as well. The old poets like David in the Bible, Solomon, Jesus, Pontius, a score of them have all had the same experience. They sensed that living presence of the divine as they went within, as they stopped from their labor, from their work in the outside world, from their attachment to all that was going on around them, and they went within, they found that beauty of the divine. The greatest musical composers can be considered mystics, the highest and the best artists, because they're all coming from a spiritual perception. A mystic is one who senses this divine. Have you ever been in a place where you were in meditation, you were in contemplation, you were in a relationship with that God of your understanding, and time just seemed to fall away? That's the mystical experience. When you recognize your oneness with the divine, your unity with all that is, then that's the most important thing. And that's where, as Alicia sang, that's where you find peace. That's where you find joy, is when you go within and you and God are one. You recognize it and you know it and you feel it. The artist, you see this passion comes out in all different ways because we're all unique individuals. The artist, whether they're painting or they're doing sculpture or whatever their art craft is, when they're one with the divine, when they feel that presence within them, they're creating because the divine is creative. That's part of the nature of the divine. And they're creating their art. That's their bliss. The musical composers that are writing the music, this is their bliss. And they can write for hours and hours because they're empowered by the divine. So whatever your craft is, whatever you're doing, and it can be everyday things, including doing the dishes, when you're aware of spirit being there and you're having that relationship with the God of your understanding, wow, you get to be a mystic because you get to be excited about what God is doing in your life. Ernest Holmes tells us that mystics are perfectly normal people, so you don't have to think you're abnormal. He said mystics don't really think of themselves as mystics. They just think of themselves as being inspired. And this is their passion in life, so this is what they're doing. They love it. And that's what Spirit empowers them to do. Whether they're artists, poets, musicians, or spiritual seekers, they're able to live that passion and bring that forth to the world. The teaching of the mystics have been that there should be a conscious courting of the divine presence. There should be a conscious receptivity to it. So we're talking here about courting the presence of the divine. And that's what all the mystics have done. Each and every one of them. They have gone inside. They've settled themselves down so that they can commune with the God of their understanding. So they can be at life and at love within themselves. How exciting is that? Do you have that passion in your life? Are you willing to stop and settle down so you can feel the divine within you? Anyone can be a mystic who does their daily spiritual practice and opens themselves up to feeling and courting the divine within their life. This is what we teach in Science of Mind, the oneness with spirit. The Peace Pilgrim says, "You are within God. God is within you." Thank you. You are within God, and God is within you. Do we recognize that? Do we live like that is true? This week I was talking to a couple people about the 5 steps of prayer. Spiritual mind treatment, we call it, or affirmative prayer. And I shared that Ernest Holmes did not develop the 5 steps of treatment. That may shock some of you, because it's one of the things that we teach in Science of Mind, is the 5 steps of treatment. It was actually some of Ernest's students that developed this scientific formula. And the reason Ernest didn't teach 5 steps of treatment is because step 1 is recognizing that God is all there is, that there is nothing else. And if God is all there is, then as we move to step 2, we unify ourselves with that. We recognize that we are one with God. So we're part of that whole. And when you live in that kind of consciousness, as Ernest did, then you can see and know that anything is possible for your life. Spirit has infinite possibilities for us, unlimited potential for each and every one of us. It's available. We're the ones that limit ourselves. We're the ones that stop that from coming into our life. I'm not good enough. Oh, well, they told me I couldn't achieve that. Have you looked at me? Do you know the doubt that's within me? On and on and on, we limit ourselves. But when we live in that consciousness that God is all there is and we are one with it, we are unstoppable. When we have that positive view and we know beyond a shadow of a doubt, Spirit is our source. Whatever I need can be provided. Thank you, God. Woohoo! We're ready to go. So we can be a mystic and have that mystical experience. You see, Ernest didn't have to teach those 5 steps of treatment because he lived the first 2 all the time. So all he had to do was speak his word. He knew God was there. He was one with it. All power was available. So when he saw a need, he would respond with his compassion. He would respond with his knowing and his boldness that this is the truth. He knew that he was not limited. And so he would speak his word and pull in that power of healing. I need it for my throat, don't I? He could pull in that healing power, whatever it was. And he would speak his word and believe it because he knew that God was all there is and that he was one with it and unlimited power was available. Ernest always said, there's a power for good in the universe greater than you are, and you can use it. And that's what we're talking about here for this mystical experience, is to get in connection with that power in the universe greater than us and learn that as we're one with that, we can use it by directing our thoughts, by speaking our word and claiming what our inheritance is as creative spiritual beings. Are you using this power in your life? Are you courting the presence of the divine in your daily spiritual practice? I know some of you do that very well. Are you receptive to the inspiration of Spirit in your life? And when you're inspired, are you willing to act on it, to show compassion and love in the world, starting with yourself? Life is always lived from the inside out. And so we must love ourselves first. And then we take that love, that peace out into the world. Ernest Holmes says, one of the great difficulties in the new order of thought is that we are likely to indulge in too much theory and too little practice. Listen to this. He didn't want us just talking about spirit, just talking about a mystical experience, talking about having a relationship with God. He said, get out there and live it. Do it. Go within. Feel it. The more you feel the passion for what you're doing, the quicker you're going to manifest what's in your mind. And that's where life gets exciting. When we can live from that passion and we can see that manifest. We see it come to fruition. I had one mystic tell me several years ago, Rick, make a decision that God is alive and well in your heart. And never change that belief. Even when your outer circumstances change, do not abandon that belief. When you rely solely on spirit, when you recognize that no matter what is going on, the job ending, the diagnosis coming, the divorce happening, no matter what it is that's going on in the outer circumstances, when you believe that God is all there is, that good is available to you, infinite possibilities are here for your life, then you can claim that. And when you're in that space of knowing that and feeling it, when you've courted that presence of the divine, then you live your life with so much more power, with so much more peace and joy. Some of you may remember this story. I've told it once before. It's about a little boy who decided he was going to run away from home. So he packed a little sack. He put a couple Twinkies in there and a couple cans of root beer. And he took off to leave home. Well, by the time he got to the park, he was getting a little tired. So he went in the park to sit down. The bench that he sat on had an old lady sitting on it. And so he sat beside her. She was silent and didn't speak to him. And he sat there for a while resting. Finally, he decided that he was hungry. So he took out a Twinkie and started to eat it. He thought, well, maybe this lady is hungry too. So he took out the other one and he handed it to her. She took it, flashed him a big smile, and started eating the Twinkie. They sat there for a while, and finally he decided he was thirsty, so he took out a root beer. He opened it and started to drink and thought, well, she might be thirsty too. So he took out the other root beer and handed it to her. She took it and flashed another big smile to him. Didn't say a word. They sat there drinking their root beer and just watching the birds and all the things going on in the park all afternoon. Finally, he decided he was getting a little tired, and he bet his mother was probably worried about where he was. So he got up, picked up his things, and started to walk for home. The old lady decided she should go home too, and she stood and started to walk back to her house. When the little boy got home, his mother said, "Where have you been?" He said, "I've been in the park. I've been meeting with God. She has such a great smile." The old woman walked in her house. Her son was there and said, "Mom, you've been gone a long time today. Where have you been?" She said, "I've been in the park with God. He's a lot younger than I thought." You see, we're each one with Spirit, one with God. And so people can see and sense that divine within us. And when we can live from that place, we're living from a place of power. Are you courting the divine presence within your life so that when you sit on the park bench, somebody can see God sitting there in you, as you, through you? Joan Borsinko in her book, The Seven Paths of God, The Ways of the Mystics, talks about different types of mystics in the world. And she goes through 7 different types of mystics here, but she talked about everyday mystics, people that are very human, but are aware of the spiritual presence in their life, and that's how they live their life, in that presence and sharing that presence. She talked about service mystics, people that find their bliss through serving others and living from that place of giving to people around them. And she talked about heart mystics who follow their heart's desire, and that connects them with the God and the grace of their understanding. She shared a story there about, because she worked at Harvard Medical School, she had one of her friends there who was a doctor, and his wife was a doctor. Their son was in Harvard Medical School. In the 2nd year of medical school, this boy decided to drop out of school and become an artist, because that's where his bliss was. That's what really turned him on. That's where he felt God coming alive within him, when he could create his artwork. It wasn't his parents' view of him, what they wanted for him, but it's what really made his heart sing, what made his soul come alive. So this tells me we can all be mystics. We can all have our own experience here of being at one with the divine, of allowing that creative responsibility to come forth from us. Rabbi David Cooper wrote the book, God is a Verb, Kabbalah and the Practice of Mystical Judaism. And in it he says, we can learn about mysticism, or we can practice being mystics. I would offer to you that it doesn't have to be an either or. I think we can learn about mystics, and that offers us a way to look at different pathways that have led people into the mystical life, and that may give us inspiration for ourselves to have our own daily spiritual practice, that we can court that presence of God. When we increase our awareness of the infinite wisdom that's everywhere present, it opens our hearts and minds to discover more about who we are as spiritual beings, having a human experience. Learning from great mystical teachers, we see that they all went within. They separated themselves from the world in order to gain access to that mystical experience, that experience of oneness with Spirit, with God, with the love that they were looking for. How many people know the name Wayne Dyer? Yes, and for most of us, I think we would consider Wayne Dyer a modern-day mystic. His words and his inspiration have helped millions of people. But that wasn't the way it always was for Wayne Dyer. Wayne, in his own words, said that he was describing a moment when his logical, agnostic mind accepted the belief in a divine intelligence. Someone said to him, Wayne, imagine millions of pieces of plastic, steel, metal, wire, carpet, thread, etc., strewn out in a junkyard. And then a huge wind comes, and a whirlwind starts to pick up all of these different pieces that are in the junkyard. When the wind stops, all of the pieces have come together to form an airplane. What are the chances of that happening, Wayne? What are the chances that the universe, the human body, the creation process, etc., were random acts? Pretty darn slim. I might say completely nil. There absolutely must be a divine intelligence at work here at that moment Wayne Dyer said, I believed. It changed my life because I recognized that there was a divine intelligence and it had been working in my life. My final story for you is a story about a lion who was raised by sheep. This lion thought it was a sheep because that's what it saw, was all these sheep. And so it lived like a sheep and it acted like a sheep. Well, one day another lion came walking through and it said to this lion, why are you acting like a sheep? And the lion said, what do you mean? I am a sheep. So the lion took the first one to a reflecting pool and had him look in. His life began to change because it began to learn who it was as a lion. Are you defining yourself by what you see around you, by the people you surround yourself with? Or are you going within to find out who you really are? Are you a lion or are you a sheep? I know some of you are just dogs, and a few of you are cats. How do we connect with the God of our understanding? That mystical experience for each one of us is waiting to be revealed in our life. And so your homework for this week is to take time to be still, to be alone and to look within your own being to discover the truth of who you are. Let us pray. Thank you, Spirit, for this message, for opening our hearts and our minds to recognize that each and every one of us are available to have a mystical experience, an experience of oneness with you as we pause and go within. Help us, God, to court your presence in our lives, to welcome that time of peaceful stillness, and to recognize the power that you are, to recognize that you are our very breath and life and the source of all that we have and all that we are. Thank you. Thank you for this truth. Help us to live from this truth each and every day. I bless us all. I release my word and we seal it by saying together, and so it is.